This is Jonas. Welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Wire podcast. I'm here today with
Eric Schrader.
And today we will reveal secrets from the jury process for the Pacific Bonsai Expo.
I think that's a good title.
As a jury member, you watched the whole process unfold last time, but this time you actually got to participate. Did you find the exercise easier or harder than you thought going into it?
Well, I mean, the full backstory, I guess, as a juror is that you and I got to sort of set up the mechanism last time in 2022 for the jurors prior to shipping it off to them. So it wasn't any sort of a surprise mechanism wise, but in terms of selecting the trees during that testing process, we had kind of like done a test run to see if you know what the show would look like if it was up to me or up to you, and it was very similar. So it felt pretty familiar.
Where did you how did you kind of navigate dealing with different categories as opposed to just trees you like, as opposed to trees that you thought were really well done? Like, did that come into it at all, or did the trees just kind of sort themselves out?
So I think that the top half of the trees that were clearly like just superior in terms of ramification or the whatever characteristics of that species were very easy to decide. You're just sort of dragging and dropping one tree over. You're like, oh my God, that's a beautiful tree. Oh my God, that's a beautiful tree. And I'm dragging it from a column on the right to a column on the left. And there were, there's 3 columns. So, and each column can only have, 25 or 30. So at some point the software just says, no, that column's full. And then you actually have to start making decisions. So the initial run through all of the submissions was kind of the really fun part, where you get to say, okay, that's amazing. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, that's amazing. And then you get into these decisions, which are what your question is about. And that's where you have to say, like, okay, we have 6 maples. We have 6 Japanese maples here. And I don't know how many there actually are, but like there's 6 Japanese maples here. Which one of these maples is actually the best? Oh, wait, that one's extra large and that one's medium. So when you break up it by species and by size, you kind of, I think overall it makes it a little bit easier if you just sort of break it down by category. And there were filtering tools as well that we were able to use. So
I'd guess a lot of the other jury members had a similar experience. One thing we found is that there was really broad consensus about the top 40 trees in the show, 40, 50, somewhere in there. I don't know how many, but pretty much everyone chose the exact same top trees. It's when it got down to what are the last 10, 15 trees that are going to round out the categories and make it a diverse show and make it just kind of a fun mix of sizes, species, and styles. That's when we had kind of a long tail of responses, and each of the 5 jury members came up with really different responses for that.
So I think that the responses in that category are kind of what get into the interesting bits in terms of being a juror as well as a show organizer, because we see the balance between, okay, do I want a show that has more diversity or do I want a show that has more junipers?
That's kind of exactly what happened this year.
Right. It did happen this year. And we were actually expecting it to happen last time and it didn't happen. I was actually pretty surprised when the jury results were
for a California-based show, we all just go into this, there might be a lot of junipers, and they didn't materialize last year. We were actually thrilled about that.
It was a very diverse show, but this time there were a lot more good junipers. And so then you ask yourself as a juror, well, okay, I have to exclude, if this isn't just going to be a juniper show, I have to exclude some of these junipers, but wait, that juniper is clearly superior to this, I don't know.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So those are the decisions that I think are really interesting. And I think that as a member of the jury, I made some maybe like choosing trees that had a lot of presence, even if they didn't necessarily have the time and training that I tend to look for in my own trees. So, you can take the starting point of a Yamadori, or you can take the starting point of a piece of nursery material. Those are completely different. So the nursery material is going to show a lot of your skill. It's going to show what you've done to the tree, but the Yamadori might have such innate crazy characteristics that you just want to see it in the show. And I found myself doing that a couple of times, and it was a tough choice to make.
Do you think you have different standards among different species or category of trees? For instance, it's been suggested that branches matter more for deciduous trees than the trunk, or trunks matter more for conifers, but not for these broadleaf evergreens. Or have you thought about, do you think, different approaches you would make for different kinds of trees?
I mean, I have to say that as a person who advocates long-term growing and cultivation, and I'm, being a grower, it disappoints me that there are almost no, sticking to the juniper topic, there are almost no junipers in the show that were not at some point Yamadori. So I think there are a couple, and those are trees that have probably been in training for a very long time. But I just, when you talk about the characteristics that you're looking for in a plant, the wild junipers definitely have those, and the cultivated junipers don't. So that was kind of a tough thing for me, because I think what it says is that we're just not quite there in terms of juniper cultivation. We're doing a great job of digging up trees from the wild. They're beautiful specimens, and we're getting them into show shape. And you're going to see that if you come to the expo. But we could also be growing trees from scratch, and that's what I didn't see when I was looking. Now, if we move off of junipers to something else, I think that there are different characteristics that you're looking for. So when I'm thinking about, to go back to the Japanese maple, I think I'm looking for a very sort of delicate looking tree, something that has a lot of twigging, something that has almost it's so difficult to make a Japanese maple with no flaws. You know what I mean? Like, it's
really
like that
hard.
I mean, to get a Japanese maple trunk with no scars on it is almost like this holy grail.
Yeah.
It's insanely difficult.
Yeah.
So I think those are the kinds of quality markers that I would tend to look for when you get down to
those last individual decisions.
Yeah, but I don't think that I had to make too many decisions like that. I think that in some cases I was making decisions more like, do we want to see a beech in the show, or do we want to have a more ramified Japanese maple? So I think those are the harder kinds of questions.
The trade-offs.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting specifically about the juniper topic, because there were so many juniper entries, is how long does it take for a collected juniper to develop the kind of characteristics that we would expect to see at a high-level show, whether here in Japan and Europe, anywhere? Like, how many years out of the ground does it take before we see? Because, you start out with a trunk and some branches that are kind of alive. Whether or not you graft, then there's kind of a rough silhouette, and then there's kind of the dialed-in design, and then there are some number of years to actually create branches that allow you to display a bonsai where the branches actually exhibit the same kind of age and character as the trunk. How many years in training do you think that takes in different cases?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a difficult question to answer, I think, because there's there's a lot of different answers. And so the two different scenarios that I think of is that I actually had a collected juniper in the 2022 show. It was a Rocky Mountain juniper that I collected myself. Nice kind of squat little trunk with really good deadwood on it. Not a lot of really crazy lifeline characteristics. And I left it with native foliage. So that tree was in 2022 only 8 years out of the ground or something like that. And it had been styled 2.5 times, maybe, kind of a rough styling initially, and then a refinement styling, and a second refinement styling, and a cleanup before the show. But the point being that it can be really fast.
But that's 8 years and a couple big workings. And even after that 8 years, how many more years before it would have the branch pads on it that you want to see on it?
Well, see, that's kind of where I was headed on the other half of this, which is that I don't see that old character coming out in some of our native junipers. So, you think about mature branching on a Kishu, Itoigawa, Shimpaku, whatever you want to discuss in terms of Chinese junipers, and you start to see those like kind of fingers in really old trees. With Rockies, and particularly with my Rocky, it has floppy foliage, and so can we ever actually achieve that? And I remember that actually just reminds me that one time Boone at a BIB show, he actually exhibited essentially a weeping Rocky Mountain juniper, and I remember walking by it and being just totally nonplussed by the whole look. And it was a beautiful piece of wood, but it didn't feel like a bonsai to me.
I saw that tree just recently, actually, and we were talking about that. The idea was to show it pre-grafting for fun, essentially.
Yeah.
And it caused a lot of dissonance.
Well, I mean, I think that's why, going back to the selecting crazy things for part of the show, like that was what it was in my mind. It was like, wait a minute, this is going to be a conversation piece in the show. But back to the juniper question, like if you go the grafting route, which I have gone, so I have my tree that was in the Artisan's Cup was a California juniper trunk that was grafted with Kishu. And I would like to think that at the point it was in the Artisan's Cup, it had mature branch characteristics and a mature silhouette, but it did not have like those sort of upward arching finger type of branch characteristics. And I've actually found in my own growing and whatnot, I don't know that I actually know how to achieve that in Shimpaku. So it would be interesting to actually get a lesson. Maybe Daisaku can teach us
hook
next
us
time
up.
he's here. Yeah.
It's funny when I think of what characteristics are prized or almost taken for granted at top shows around the world. It's expected that trees have been in training for a really long time. And when you think of, even at the Kokufu, the prizes go to trees that look old, and that's not just an old trunk. That's old branches. It's that the characteristics the trees accrue over time based on repeated application of those really high techniques. And a funny thing that comes from that is actually it is a reflection of the different styles with which we can approach styling. So that's repetitive. Specifically, if we look back 20 years when people were spending a ton of time, money, and energy detailing out trees, and say 25 years ago at the Kokufu, tons of detail wiring, every last inch of deadwood manicured to within the millimeter. Everything was super clean, tidy, and in place. Now, in recent years, trees are shown in a much more naturalistic touch. You see much less wire on trees. In fact, many great conifers are shown with no wire whatsoever in Japan, and that they have a very relaxed feeling. And for those who like that tidy, crisp, high design concept look, they're disappointed by what's happening today. However, because those junipers have such great structure, even relaxed, even with the fuzzier outlines, the basic core structure of that great branch density of those little fingerlings branches that support the pads are there. They may not line up the same, but they're there. And so if you are showing a tree with a more naturalistic or relaxed or informal approach, and it never had that structure to begin with, that always brings up the question for me, how do you even define or describe to someone who wants to show a tree, what level do you want to see the branches before it's even appropriate for a high-level show?
I mean, it's a good point. I think that some of the junipers that I saw in the submissions did not show mature clouds. So junipers are not always going to show clouds. Like I was just talking about with the Rocky, it's difficult, at least for me, to achieve any sort of a cloud kind of feeling with the Rocky Mountain juniper. But I think you have to achieve that good, mature kind of clean look first before you can get past that to the aged look or the soft look that you're talking about. And I just think we're not quite there yet.
And that's one thing that I've kind of come to terms with. And having been going to bonsai shows all over the country for a very long time, I've enjoyed taking photos of everything. And when I publish a photo of a tree in a show, it doesn't mean that it's a better tree or a worse tree. It doesn't mean necessarily that I like or don't like the tree. What I've always kind of thought of it to myself is it's a way to suggest this is where things are now. it's a record of where we are. And if we can see that we've got more to go, then I'm kind of documenting our starting points for where we want to go, and it allows us to measure our progress toward that goal. We can all decide what our visions are for what a beautiful, absolutely full, mature, filled show would look like, but our limitation is what gets submitted to the show. And our instruction for the jury is to deliver the most interesting quality show that they can find from among whatever gets submitted. And so we were super fortunate that we had 175 submissions to fill 75 spaces in the show. And that gave the jury a lot of room to work with. And even within that, it sounds like it was really easy to get started. And then, filling out those last spots, it brings up all these other questions that maybe 10, 20 years from now, if we have more mature trees, it's a very different looking process.
I think actually even just 2 years from now, there were trees that were submitted that did not get in, that the main reason they didn't get in was that the branch maturity was not as high as other submissions in the same category and or species.
Yeah.
So, if you are submitting a conifer and there's a lot of junipers like we've been talking about in there, if your branches just are they're almost there, but they're not quite there, then that's really shows in the photos. It's really obvious to the jury which tree has been in training longer. So I mean, this is all just to say, if your tree did not get in, that is the most likely reason, and just keep working at it, just keep refining the branching and making it look more polished. But I want to flip this because we've been talking about junipers. So I am really excited about some of the Korean hornbeams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've seen any of these trees in person before. There's a number of them coming in from various places. You won the medium category in 2022 with a Korean hornbeam. That is a fantastic tree you've been working on for 20 years. What do you think about the Korean hornbeam lineup? It's different size categories, but
well, I was just tickled from the beginning when I saw these submissions come in. I kind of giggled to myself, and I just literally, oh boy, was kind of the thought I had. The deciduous categories are going to be pretty strong this year, especially among the large and extra large deciduous. We're pretty darn happy with what came in. And Andrew and I have been saying it for years. Some species are fun and easy to work with. Some are super challenging. Korean hornbeam in general, we always get the impression that they want to be bonsai. Ume do not want to be bonsai, and they'll fight you tooth and nail to the grave. They'll die instead of becoming a bonsai if it's up to them.
I think we might extend that to the entire plum family.
Oh, challenges, boy. And so, and we have some trees, like historical level, really interesting trees that we're just super excited to share with everybody when the doors open. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them in person and all under the same roof. That'll be pretty special.
So I remember, just because it was my early experience in Boone's Garden, seeing a old Korean hornbeam trunk for the first time and just looking at it like, what in the world is going on with this tree? Because if you're not familiar with the age in Korean hornbeams, so I've started a number of Korean hornbeams that are still 10 to 15 years old or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it takes longer than that for the trunks to really gain all of the character that they seem to be able to gain. There's a lot of veining that goes on in the, almost like a lifeline on a juniper. And then the bark somehow bleaches from like a sort of mundane kind of look to almost like this brilliant white with specks in it. And once you get there, it is just sublime. It is unbelievably beautiful trees.
Well, it's funny you say that about Boone, because I remember I'd always heard of the species and had seen completely unremarkable specimens. And then one day Boone brought a Korean hornbeam into the meeting in fall, and it had fall color. And for those of you that we need to remind that don't live in the Bay Area, we, as a rule, do not get fall color on literally any species other than maybe red maple. Occasionally we'll have a winter where the Japanese maples color or the hornbeams, but he brought this ball of fire. It was this red, orange, and yellow leaves, and I can still see it in my head. And the funny thing is, that might be the exact tree that I ended up buying from him. I don't remember that detail, but it was the first time the species even meant anything to me. And it just, oh, color is an option? We can do that? Oh man, that was a thrill. And so immediately I'm like, okay, I need to have one of these.
I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous trees, and I think that people are going to be blown away by the quality of the ones that are in the show. Because, to be honest, I mean, having been to 3 or 4 Kokofu shows, I think there's going to be a couple in there that could easily get into Kokofu, if not win a prize, and that's a pretty high bar.
Again, we're tickled with the submissions that came in on those scores. And it's funny when you were saying how many trees are just a few years out. When I saw the trees that came in this year, it actually started relaxing me, because we all knew that a lot of people would be able to pull trees off the shelf for a first show. And we just, with a lot of hard work and the exhibitors doing a ton of hard work, we got there for the first show. And then immediately I thought to myself, well, how long does it take for a tree to become great? Probably more than 2 years. And if we're not expecting more trees to become great in the next 2 years, that means we're going to rely on people with deep collections or people that have to date not participated in the show. And seeing this year's submissions tells me that we have trees that'll be ready in 1 year, in 3 years, in 6 years. We've got a lot of trees that in the near future will be coming online, you could say, where they're finally starting to become great in a lot of ways. And so that actually made me really optimistic for the future to see what's coming in.
So do you think that it's going to get harder and harder to get a tree in the show?
So here's the hints of that, what we're seeing right now. Now, I was not on the jury, but I got to see how everything came together when we pooled together everyone's responses. And in terms of getting harder to get in, there were examples. For instance, once in a while, 2 people would submit trees that were the exact same shape, style, species, everything. You know, whether it was a redwood, whether it was a juniper, whether it was what was the other one? There were several species where it's funny, all bonsai are unique, but we had these trees that at a glance, it almost looked like the exact same tree. And in every single case, the jury chose the tree with a cleaner outline, more time in training, and a tree that looked like more technique has been applied to it over a greater number of years.
I think bald cypress is the last one.
Oh, bald cypress was another one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean
there were a lot of bald cypress submissions this year.
Yep.
And it was interesting when it came down to it, people chose for which ones looked like which ones were either extraordinary in some way and or have been in training and show that for a long time.
Well, it's funny because almost with bald cypress, and I don't want to go down a bald cypress rabbit hole because I'm far from an expert, but with bald cypress, it's like almost all of them have really good taper.
And almost none of them have really good branches.
Yeah. So that was an interesting exercise to look through those.
It was. And so it'll be fun to see some because we don't have those locally in the Bay Area. And so not that we have them locally in Oregon, Washington, and Southern California. All of these bald cypress have pretty much, they're nursery stock or they've come in from far away. But it's fun for us to see them because they can tell a different story of a different experience that our climate and our environment doesn't offer. So we love the bump to the diversity that they provide the show.
We just have to make sure the backdrops are high enough.
Oh man, we need to do that for sure. We got some gimongous trees this year. Yeah. But in terms of, is the competition getting higher? I think the form that's going to take is, yes, it's going to get harder and harder every year, and it's going to be very case by case and sporadic. Some individual species were really, like Sierra junipers we had coming out of our ears this year. We had a bunch of Sierra junipers. We had, of different kinds of junipers, a whole bunch. But then we had some broadleaf categories or small tree categories that were not as competitive as they were last time even. And so it's going to be, I believe, sporadically harder on average over time for more categories as the years go by.
It was consistent from last time to this time in terms of submissions that we were short with broadleaf evergreens. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting question because I think you and I discussed it off tape at one point.
A lot, yeah.
Like thinking about what do we need to do in order to get more broadleaf evergreens? And then maybe realizing that there's a reason that there aren't as many broadleaf evergreens of show quality, and that it just because of the lack of seasonality or something, what are the innate characteristics of broadleaf evergreens? So if you're a broadleaf evergreen expert listening to this and you want to school us.
Give us a call and you'll be the next guest.
I mean, it was olives, oaks,
azaleas.
And azaleas. That's pretty much it. We didn't get any LA Agnes, or we had an LA Agnes
Yeah, there was
submission.
LA Agnes submitted. We often get, let's see, were there hollies this year? Yeah, holly, like Yopon holly, for instance.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's like a really small number. And of the ones that have been submitted, many of them are just really early in their journey as bonsai. And so I have become an odd, like I never would have suspected I'd become a fan of them. And I think they have almost everything going against them as bonsai. The number one thing, the number one knock against broadleaf evergreens is that you don't see a lot coming from Japan. And so there's no historical background of we're used to seeing all these amazing broadleaf evergreens that have been dealt with wonderfully over decades, generations. We don't have that the same.
Well, I mean, LA Agnes is what I jumped on, which Silverberry.
Yeah, LA Agnes, Kinzu, there's some odds and ends. But what % of any show is that in Japan? Low single digits.
Right. And I think more in the Shohin categories than in
more
actually.
Often. Yeah.
And, you know, Jeremiah, I think, posted something. I don't remember what platform it was, but he said, "Can we please have more camellia bonsai?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm working on it, but I'm not working on it. Like, I have a half a dozen camellia, mini camellia, like not like a Sasanko or something with a big flower, but miniature camellias.
Right.
That would be a great broadleaf evergreen to have in a show. And I remember seeing camellias in the Kokofu shows.
Yeah.
They're always kind of the counterpoint, though. It doesn't seem like they're ever really the main attraction. Maybe that's my perception, though.
No, that's very real. There are a small number of them, and they're less compelling overall. In recent years, bougainvillea have become much more common in Kokofu.
Oh, yeah.
The last one we went to had a bougainvillea, and it was like one. You're starting to see ficus, and like you're starting to see some new things in there. Oh, we did have a bunch of ficus submissions this year as well. That's the obvious one.
I actually think, in retrospect, thinking about the submissions and broadleaf evergreens and going to tropicals as a category rather than just ficus, because there's so many more broadleaf evergreen tropicals than what we've just talked about. I mean, I guess a lot of them are ficus, but there's a lot of others. It's like, why don't we get more?
Well, that's easy. I'd say we haven't done the numbers yet, but it might be 70% of the trees come from Oregon, Washington, Utah, California, and that's it.
So they're not.
And then it's just like a long tail of things from far away. And then you get the far away places, and we're talking about the Midwest, Texas, Colorado, all the way up to the Northeast and New York. What we're not getting is a ton of trees from the Southeast. And I'm totally fine with that. But when you look at where tropicals thrive outdoors year round, that is not where the trees are coming from. And that's honestly kind of the point of the show, is that we wanted a more local representation, because it's too long if we all have to drive across the coast every time to go to a national-based show. The national show in Rochester has fantastic tropicals every year, and they have a tropical award, and they have, you can just tell what stuff grows within a day's drive of that show, because it's really awesome stuff. Ironically, what won best tropical in 2023, but this amazing Brazilian rain tree that was grown in a greenhouse in Connecticut. Not always known for their tropicals, but like the tree was spectacular. Like it was just and it was one of two big, beautiful rain trees.
Well, I think actually that point about the rain tree from Connecticut is the perfect reason why we don't have tropicals. We in California are so spoiled that we do not have to think about greenhousing our trees all winter. So it's like
we don't have that natural environment for something that doesn't grow well here.
Right.
And they need a greenhouse for every species to avoid it from dying.
But it also goes back decades. Like think about from like the 1950s, nobody like was growing tropicals as bonsai in the Bay Area or Southern California or Oregon for that matter. And so there's not a history of growing tropicals in the region. And so it's not going to show up in the regional show. It's that kind of thing is really fascinating when you start to think about how the 50 years that precedes this show you cannot go back and redo it. You can't fix it. You can't change it. You have to work with what that 50 years produced.
And so what I've been fixating on, that's way too strong a word, thinking about is where are we looking, how are we orienting the current community for the next 50 years? And what's funny is this never occurred to me until just recent weeks, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is I can't think of many examples of a prominent bonsai professional who rose to prominence without easy access to some kind of material, and they are forever associated with that kind of material. And I say easy, not to suggest that there's anything easy about what they have done or found, but they pretty much had to personally collect it, or they had an ability to buy something that was collectible. And that's true in Japan because that's what we have, are the species that were collectible at a time. Why do we call so-and-so Mr. California juniper? It's not because all species were easy to come by and work with. It's because only one species was readily diggable and didn't die. And that's California juniper. And that's why that was the first wave of bonsai across the country, was so juniper focused. And it's a species that had generational history in Japan. So it checked a lot of boxes. We knew what to look for. We knew what characteristics we could. We knew basic husbandry or care for these things. And so that's what you could go and dig up.
But if you take that same scenario, but you say it wasn't traditional from Japan, Coast Live Oak being a perfect example.
Yeah.
Super diggable tree, super trainable tree. Cork oak being kind of almost the same. If you're not familiar with Coast Live Oak, those are really great broadleaf evergreen trees for bonsai, and locally there's a good tradition of it at this point, but there was no tradition coming from Japan that I'm aware of where people are like, oh, go dig up those oak trees.
Right. That's right. And so we have yet to find a way to exploit, if it's out there, any resource for those oak bonsai. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why we don't see more. It's that supply. Who's the oak expert? JT is the name that comes to mind just right off the top. And you look at his garden and it's a whole bunch of different oaks. It's actually, he had to work really, it's not that he had just some awesome flow of oaks. He's got one of these and two of those and three of those and one of those. It's a really neat, diverse assortment of different species. And so name a professional that isn't prominent, because they had access to something, and that tends to be what they're known for. And so when I think going forward, in the broadleaf evergreen category, we need a bunch of oaks before oak is going to be much more of a thing. Redwoods are fantastic, but again, we've had to date one awesome source of redwood material, Bob Scheinman at Mendocino Coast Bonsai, and that's that essentially.
I think, there's other people digging up redwoods, just not on a commercial scale.
And other people doing oaks and other people doing all these, but in terms of scale, that's where it tips the balance,
Well, it's crazy to think about. I think about this as a grower that, like, in order to actually have an impact on the entire community, you can't just have 100 trees or 200 trees.
Nope.
You have to have thousands of trees and assume that, I don't know, some large percentage of them are just going to disappear.
Yeah.
You're never going to see them again. And that's not a bad thing. It's just kind of filling up.
That's what the process looks like.
Right.
It's just addressing demand is what that's doing.
And you're filling up the community with these trees. And even if you never see them again, like years later, decades later, they might resurface. We regularly get calls from people who are like, oh, my dad got these trees back in 1960 and I can't take care of them. So do you want to buy them? And those are great opportunities. But
so this is a really long way to say that because none of this had been happening for broadleaf evergreens decades ago, we to this day don't have as many. And probably the main reason we're even talking about this is that we live in a climate where what does really well around here, a lot of broadleaf evergreens.
Yeah, because the leaves are tough and they survive the summers.
The deciduous oaks will do well where it gets cold in winter, but the evergreen oaks, the corks and the Coast Live, those are the ones that do well in this really mild climate right where we are. Olives do really well.
Now, you mentioned redwood, and I think we should talk about redwood for a few
Specifically,
minutes.
please.
Specifically, yeah, because so I don't know off the top of my head how many redwoods. I'm thinking of 2 large redwoods that were submitted to the show, and I think only one got in. But last time in the exhibit, we had 2 redwoods, one sort of a traditional formal upright kind of that I believe came from the Bonsai Garden Lake Merritt, and the other one coming from Peter T's garden. I believe it was Jeff Stern's tree.
Yes.
And those were very different styles.
That was such a good example of the diversity of approaches to take opposite ends of the spectrum for redwoods.
Now, I think I was saying to you earlier that, like, I don't know, and you all can take this as a challenge. I don't know that anybody outside of from San Luis Obispo to about the northern border of California could actually win out in terms of redwoods because of the conditions. Like, so this is, we were talking about conditions for, so if your redwood is going to grow, so Peter's getting, I think I asked him at one point, 5, 6, 7 spurts of growth per season. This is the same kind of thing that we see from like those crazy tropicals coming out of Taiwan and Florida, where it's like, oh yeah, that just, oh, it's growing again.
You like, just keep cutting, or like chojubai in Portland.
Right. So
it's like, oh, good for you. You cut another foot of growth off this month.
It's like home field advantage.
Yes. and that's exactly that, back to that access to the material, is people have to do what goes well in their area. And yeah, that's an open question. I believe there are more and more people growing redwoods around the country now, but it's really small numbers, and it's almost canary and coal mine level work at this point. But I've talked to a bunch of people that have them, because whenever I write about them, I get fun questions from around the country.
Everybody always asks me about dawn redwood when I write about redwood.
Yeah, I get that too. Yeah, very, very, very different.
It's like apples and oranges to me. Yeah. I can't even connect
exactly.
the two.
They share a name. It's like downhill skiing and cross country skiing. Both have the word skiing in them. But
oh my God, that's such a good analogy.
Yeah, it's not that far off. Yep. So the redwood case was interesting, because when we look at the two shows together, all of the redwoods that have been submitted, there have been several prominent approaches to developing redwood bonsai. And I still think, even in light of all of that, it's still early days for figuring out what the optimal treatments are for redwood foliage. There are very different approaches, and I think there should be. That's totally reasonable. But then there's, based on your approach, what does excellence look like given the approach you're taking?
So, I mean, we talked about density a couple of times in different contexts, but I think that I know from the jury process that the redwood that got in was the densest of the 2 or 3 or 4 that were submitted. And
yeah, that's a tree that has been pinched every 3 weeks for the last 5 or 6 years. I still remember the day that tree was purchased, actually, and I remember when work began on that. That was years ago. Might be 6, 7 years ago. Something. I
think I remember seeing it early on as well.
Yeah.
But there's different techniques for redwoods, and there's a lot of information out there now in terms of like, oh, do this at exactly that time and whatnot. So the question comes down to who is putting all of that technique to the time test and getting the best result, because you can't just pinch it and then pinch it a second time and think that you're done. Right. So I mean, it's that. I'm
literally trying to teach the different approaches, and I'm 3 years into this, and I'm still 2 or 3 years away from what I would consider a halfway reasonable silhouette. It just takes time. And that's literally pinching many times a year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been pitching the heck out of every redwood in my garden for the last couple of years, and I think I still did it wrong.
Yeah.
I like, I mean, within reason, there's still, so I have one that's kind of Kifu size, like maybe 12 inches, and I left about an inch worth of wired growth at the base, thinking, oh, just, I'll sacrifice that interior portion just a little bit, not like a long piece, and then make like a really tight silhouette by pinching. And now I'm finding that I keep almost cutting back to the same place because
which is the original problem that everyone had with redwoods. Yeah. The brief history for the non-California or Oregon types that have been growing redwoods for a long time is, for the longest time, everyone just styled a redwood like it was a juniper, and they just pinched where the new growth came out, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope backbuds appear. Some do, but you're only ever, if you're taking that approach, you're only ever going to have really limited ability to create a design other than a very sparse tree, period. Like, it's a very different approach. At the other end of the spectrum, there's the technique where you're pinching everything constantly, precisely where you want it to bud back. And we've in recent years learned, I mean, Randall Lee's been doing this for 10 years, but you can pretty much get a redwood as dense as you want. And so the question is, knowing that we can design trees thin and we can design them thick, what is the most attractive way to do it? And I have yet to see a single redwood ever styled the way I want to see it styled. I love the effects we're getting from the different approaches, but I've yet to see, if I see density, I don't usually see structure. And if I see structure, I don't usually see density. My holy grail, and I would love to try to do this, I'm working on it, and it'll take a few more years, is there a way to demonstrate the structure that we appreciate for trees that have experienced good training for a number of years without just making it a pincushion? Because it's honestly very simple to make a pincushion style redwood. And we saw that one in the expo last time, and we're going to see more in future expos. But I don't want to see just the skimpy ones either. You know, it's going to be. I wish I had a better answer to all of this stuff.
Well, I mean, I think it's just fascinating. It's the kind of thing that when you come to the expo, you can talk to your friends about and just sort of get into these debates about, like, well, you know, what was the technique that led to this, or what was the technique that led to that? And I think that, you know, going through the different species, is there one tree? I mean, I named a couple of different species, but is there one tree that you're the most excited to see?
We already talked about it, but
really, yeah,
yeah, I
the
think,
hornbeam.
Yeah, the big giant hornbeam is one of my favorite trees in the country. That's just a great tree.
I think I'm actually.
There'll be a cryptomeria that is probably my favorite cryptomeria in the country, and that's a species I adore and always have. And
so
you just don't
rare,
get to see
though.
Those a lot.
They're so rare in the U.S.
There's a handful of decent ones. And they're so easy to grow. The care and the work on them isn't totally straightforward, but it's known how to do it. And everyone who's studied in Japan typically knows at least a good starting point for working on them, if not has decent expertise with it.
But
like I'd
no
say
skipping.
Good needle junipers, there are close to zero examples of that in North America, but we do have some good examples of feminine junipers with needle juniper technique on them. But again, we're talking handful of amazing examples of that.
Did I mention that I collected a common juniper out of South Dakota?
Oh, what a kick.
And compared it to a seed that came from Japan, the needle juniper. And I always had this question in my mind. They're the same. They're exactly the same. I cannot tell the difference. I mean, I have them tagged.
And there are common junipers on just about every continent. They're all over the world. And we have oddly yet to see any North American common junipers really succeed as bonsai. It's been a small number of them for all of the ones that are out there.
I think they're a lot harder to dig. I think that's the problem.
I think the digging and the training, and they also may not develop the kind of trunks we're looking for. That could be the other problem. We don't see just a bunch of Tosho-like trunks all over the place. Speaking of, there's a shore juniper that I'm excited to see. It's long been a favorite tree of mine that's in the area.
A tree that you and I have seen a couple of times for, I mean, maybe 15 years now.
Yeah, a lot of years we've seen the tree develop.
That would be as close to a Tosho as what I think
as we tend to see around here. Yeah. Since we don't really have a history of feminas in the Bay Area, there's a handful here and there, but lots of good ones in Southern California.
Yeah, I don't touch them. They're too prickly.
Yeah, they're dangerous, yeah. Shore junipers are a lot softer, a lot easier to work with.
Okay, so
there's a handful of trees that I'm pretty excited about. I know that, so Eric and I both had this experience where we see the trees in photos and we feel like we know this show really well, and then you get to see them in the room and it's completely different. The trees always look better in person, and so it's interesting intellectually knowing that, but not knowing what it's going to feel like to see these trees in person.
So I think the tree I'm most excited to see is actually a corkbark elm.
Yes. I know which one that is.
I've never seen it in person, but from the photo, it's
stunning.
It is stunning in the photo, and I think it'll be even better in person. The question is, will it show up? How many leaves will it have when it shows up? I think that's an interesting question to contemplate, because if it's from Southern California, it would not have dropped leaves by the date of the show. And so then do you decide to exhibit the tree with just a few leaves on it that are green, or do you take all the leaves off? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
The owner and I have been having this discussion on that exact topic for about 2 years now.
And because the show's a little bit earlier, the fall color...
That does no favors at all. It'll be green and healthy. Yeah.
So the guys coming from Oregon have the advantage in terms of color.
And we've been literally talking about whether or not it's worth taking the tree out of state. Like we've talked, or up to the mountains. We've talked about so many crazy ideas.
So in 2022, I think Greg McDonald took the Fall Color Prize with a Washington hawthorn.
There's always an informal prize at the expo, and that's going to be the honorary Greg McDonald Fall Color Award, and the informal prize, the inaugural informal winner for that, hands down, Greg McDonald.
But
there were a couple though. There was another one,
Jeff
small guy.
Stearns.
The red maple.
The shishi was really good on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, that one we missed that one, but the optimal we
It was
missed
like
by
2 days
a
off.
week or two or something. Yeah, it was not a long time.
But I think we have a couple of hawthorns, at least
I
one.
think so, yeah, and I'll be really curious to see what they look like this year, timing-wise.
And then hopefully at least one of the hornbeams shows up with a little bit of color on it.
So on the Chinese elm topic, you saw very different branch patterns on the Chinese elms. Some favoring overall density, some favoring primary branches. There are very different ways to make branches. In general, there is no basic model for deciduous trees. Half are styled like conifers with heavy main primary branches and then almost pads in some cases, and some have very up and out branch structures. And I think we have two different approaches to branches in Chinese elms this time. I'll be curious to see what they all look like together.
I have a long history with Chinese elms, but I can't say that I've ever completely mastered it to the level of what I think is going to come in this show. And it's going to be really interesting to actually hopefully have the time as the organizer to actually stand in front of the tree and like kind of think about like, well, how do you get to there? So,
yeah, live in a place where they grow really well, which is most everywhere, and then just do a lot of work. They grow fast, and if you keep them really healthy, that means you get to prune them more often, so you can get them really, really dense if you work on them a lot.
A lot of defoliation, though.
A lot of trimming, a lot of defoliation.
I guess that's true for hornbeams as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the work's a lot easier on hornbeam than it is on the elm with those tiny, tiny little leaves. Yeah, so there'll be some pretty darn fun trees, for sure. And that was interesting. You talked about how the redwood example, where in some cases it's a 2-person competition or 2-tree competition in terms of what gets in or not. And some people submitted things and no one else submitted anything like it. That's going to make it a little easier road potentially. And then when you have 4 people that submit very similar trees, that means the competition is going to be a lot wonkier. Now, how important is it that we keep pushing diversity in the show? All that matters is quality. It's going to be the top 50 trees. And you walk into a room with 50 large junipers. Does that solve any problems?
You're never going to get everybody to agree on that point. Because if you say, oh, this tree didn't get in, and then the person who owned that tree walks into the room and is like, well, my tree was better than that.
We've heard that exact phrase at shows on more than one occasion.
But
yeah,
was your tree better than the other tree of the same style, size, and species that is in the room? And that is the actual real competition, I think.
And the other lesson, which we haven't really talked about at all, is we've now worked with 7 different jury members over the last 3 years. No 2 are alike.
And what do you think about the results of 5 jury members versus 3?
Thrilled by it.
So,
just really, really happy with that. We, the different jury members submitted their feedback at different times. And so I actually had the opportunity to run the numbers as new jury members' results came in. And the results became more and more balanced because the system we chose really favored consensus. And so as we had more people participating, that favored trees that more people, a higher percentage of jury members selected. And that felt really, really good. Whereas with smaller numbers of people, it just felt more variable. It was kind of hard to tell how the show would shape up the same way.
Yeah, I think that having 5 jury members I think it made it much more clear what the consensus was. And it's also important to note that, like, if you submitted a tree and it didn't get in, this is not those 5 people saying your tree is bad. It's them saying the tree is not ready, or just like we've been saying this whole time, it didn't stack up to the other ones that were submitted in the same type or whatever.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't say at all. Is last time it was almost identical numbers. We had roughly 175 submissions, 75 got in 2 years in a row. The difference is last time the quality was far more variable across those 175 trees. This time, almost every single tree that submitted, not every one, but what, 70-80% of the trees submitted will be able to get into an expo at some point in time.
Yeah, a lot
It's
of good
just,
material.
there's some number of years out, and that was awesomely different than last time. So I feel like things are very much headed in the right direction on that score.
It's almost like the ones that didn't make it. It's like they're on deck.
That's right. That's right. Because there's going to be another one of these before you know it, and
none of the trees that are in this time get to come back for the next one. So
they're all taking a 4-year break. And so I haven't talked to anyone who's planning on showing trees that they put in the first expo.
I don't think I'm going to. And I had a lot. I mean, you and I each submitted a lot of trees.
That was a big mistake. I had 7 trees in the show.
Well, and I think I had 5 or 6. And
when you have multiple medium or small displays, that kills you because that's a lot of individual trees.
There's a lot of individual trees. And it also, that in combination with me selling a good portion of my collection while I'm sort of becoming a grower, left me with only 1 submission this time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got 2 trees in the show this time, but I have stuff lined up for the future, but it's going to be at best a couple trees here and there, but I want to go as, long as I can before I pull something out again. And even then it would be more likely a second tree or something from a Shohin display where you need to fill it in.
Well, I mean, that's one of the toughest things. I mean, I've said it before, putting together a quality Shohin display is the toughest thing. And if you have to calculate in that the tree can't be from the last show and you can't use it in the next show, then all of a sudden your Shohin bench has to be pretty dang deep.
And so they figured this out in Japan, in Europe, and on the East Coast. We are perfectly capable of figuring this out. The heartbreaking part is I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to sort this out. And so that's why, having been for the last 2.5 years doing a lot of Shohin-focused teaching with Andrew up in Oregon, we're realizing how long it's going to take to start developing those trees. We've got a ton of stuff in progress, whether in my garden or elsewhere, but that's just going to take time.
And I think it takes, so it takes a lot of people, and on each one of those people having a lot of trees to really put together good Shohin displays.
And I really do want to encourage more people to work together over time. And I am honestly, the single biggest takeaway for me on the Shohin topic is stop trying to do 6 tree displays when you only have 2, 3, 4, or 5 great trees. I love a 6 tree display if you've got 6 fantastic trees, but I highly encourage people to focus on filling up the 6-foot space with your best trees.
Well, you're the prime example of that from last time. 2022, you had a 2-tree Shohin
and I
display.
went out of my way to do that because I wanted to start demonstrating all of the alternatives. Like, there are great stands that allow for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 tree displays, and we're so familiar with these big boxes with these, hotels of little trees, and it's time to start. So there was once a 7 tree display where there was or 7 or 8. There was an extra shelf in the Shohin stand, and I forget what show this was from. And I remember Marco Invernizzi saw a picture of it and he said, "Oh, it looks like a hotel for trees."
I've never heard that.
Oh, it was like the funniest thing I heard. It was great. And for some reason that stuck. And so I want to show, really, there's a great history of this. And you go to the top show in Japan, it's a room full of different numbers of trees. The top category in each size is, yes, the full 6 tree boxes, but this is a country with thousands and thousands of great trees. And you can see 2, 3, 4, 5 tree displays or different categories for all of those, even in the best show in the world. So why can't we copy the best show in the world and cut down the number of trees to have higher overall quality?
Well, so you're talking about Gafuten, right?
Yep.
The actual Shohin show where there's more diversity, because I really wish that I had gone to Gafuten at some point, and I'm still planning on it at some point, but I've only
this
ever
next
seen...
year, because it's going to be number 50 this coming January 2025. I'll be there.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is that having only gone to Kokofu, there's less diversity.
Much less.
In the Shohin room in Kokofu than
you tend to
what you're
see more
describing.
Kifu displays and then the full 6 tree box displays. And that's what people are used to at these big shows.
Yeah, like a dominant Kifu with a Shohin.
Right. So the top tree might be 11 inches tall or something, and then, paired with a Shohin. And once in a while, you might see 2 pretty darn small trees. But in general, you're more likely to see either the boxes that hold 4 or 5 trees, or I guess 5 or Yeah, 4 or 5 trees. The Roko stands, which would have the 4 trees, or the full Fuji stands, which would have 5 trees in them.
Well, I mean, I don't have a Shohin display in this time, so I don't need to worry about it. But if somebody has a Shohin display and they need to change stands, what do you think they need to do?
Well, I've been trying to import as many stands as possible the last few years, so I have quite a stable of Shohin stands these days, some available for sale, some for rent. I do have a page on the website with right now only about 2/3 of my stands. I'm trying to take pictures and measure every single stand on the property so that if people need stuff for the show, and this is on my to-do list in the next month and a half. So as people are finalizing their display materials, I want to be able to make sure that people have as much of that kind of stuff as possible. I've got, I don't know if it's 1,000 pots in the backyard, but I've got hundreds of show pots in the backyard. I've got tons of stands now, and lots of small Shohin stands as well, like the stands that go on top of the stands. I've been importing those like they're going out of style. I think I must have brought 100 or 200 of those to the Shohin seminar this last winter.
It kind of reminds me of visiting Kobayashi's garden outside of Tokyo. I actually don't. We were in a taxi, so I have no idea how to get there. But but he had an entire room, and when I say room, this was like. It was almost like a barn. I mean, it was
this big, long room.
It was a long room with glass all along one side, and from floor to ceiling were stacked stands.
Beautiful old stands.
And he had another room full of antique pots that...
Many rooms of pots.
Yeah. So, but that kind of stable of resources is hard to come by, I think, in the U.S. And so as a Shohin, enthusiast, or if you're getting into Shohin and you think you want to make submissions, just keep in mind that doing it all by yourself is maybe... I'm guilty of this. I want to do it all by myself, but I think... if you admit to yourself, hey, this might be a fun thing to do with my 2 friends, then you actually have a much better display. So,
yeah. And that goes for the trees, for the stands, for whatever other elements are in there, because that's a lot of stuff you need for a display. And they actually have a whole category at Gafuten for club displays, and it's when you have multiple people going in on displays together. It's literally its own category.
Oh, interesting.
And I've been trying to encourage people that for the expo for years, where get your club together. Like, there are a lot of clubs where between the entire club you can find 2 people with 1 good tree each to put together a 2-tree Shohin display, and we had 0 2-tree submissions this year. 0. And that would have been an easy win too. Like, I could just tell you right now, we did not get a lot of Shohin submissions. It would have got in if they were good trees.
I think there were a couple of 3 or 4.
We had 1 or 2 3s, maybe 1 5 or 6, and then the rest were all 7s.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to keep 7 trees all happy and healthy for an entire season between the submission period and the actual show too. So we'll see.
And we've been generous that people can, swap out as need be or drop trees out. You're always welcome to show fewer trees than are accepted. Like, that's totally fine. If we accepted the Shohin display, we're actually going to follow up with people and suggest that they really just lead with their strongest trees, and that's perfectly acceptable, because that means still that the display did get in. It went through the jury process, and so if it's just a subset of that, that's perfectly acceptable. We just want to have the highest level display that we're capable of today, and there's going to be some categories of the show that are stronger than others, and that just tells us where we need to orient going forward to try to strengthen those up in the future.
Now, we haven't talked about the alternates, and
that's right.
I think that it's...
And there was some confusion about that.
Yeah, so I got a couple of questions. Do you want to start?
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Go for it.
Well, I mean, if someone asked me what is an alternate, and an alternate is... the show is meant to be about 75 displays, and so if somebody drops out and says, this tree got attacked by spider mites and it's not going to make the show, then we will go to the alternate list and pull in one of those trees. Now, which tree gets pulled in is kind of up to us as the organizers, because we're trying to maintain the balance that the jury created in the jury results. But if you are on the alternate list and you are keen to have a tree in the show, please keep your trees
in good shape this year.
In good shape this year, just in case. We really appreciate it.
And we might have to go off the alternate list as well. We might have to go deeper because there's always some churn in terms of what trees get in and stay in good shape. Like health stuff happens to all of us. That's going to be the case. In terms of how we choose, there are several variables because what is the size, style, and species that dropped out? And so is there something that fills in that same category in the show? That's one variable. The other is, did it represent a category that's already overrepresented? And that's an opportunity for us to go to something new. That's a second variable. And then the third variable is, even among the alternates, what are the scores or the feedback we received from the jury in terms of where they want to, or how badly they wanted to see that tree in the show? So we really have three different kind of measures by which to find an alternate, let alone, the owner of the tree. If that person already had a tree in the show and they're on the alternate list, that might be another consideration. But all of that kind of gets mixed together. And so there's no just knee-jerk obvious way to fulfill that, just like the way there was no obvious knee-jerk way to fill the show up front.
Yeah, it's kind of like curating an art display. You just have to kind of, take into account everything, and then it's not a guess, but it's.
And let's say shout out to Lucas last time for the first expo. He was. We had a few substitutions along the way for the first expo, and I believe the absolute latest submission, maybe it wasn't 3 weeks before the show, but it was very close to the show from what I recall. And I remember this was before we'd met, and I just said, hey, by the way, your tree would be a great compliment. Does it still happen to be ready? And he's like, yes, it is. And we were just as thrilled that the tree was in good shape after all of those months later that it was able to participate, and it made it in the show, and there was a spot right there for it. It actually worked perfectly. So we were really happy about that. But we just don't know. Will it be a large number? Will it be zero? We have no idea. Our guess is that it'll be a handful of trees will be swapping in and out.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the all the extra large, like how extra large this show is going to be?
That's another thing that we really didn't see coming. We were surprised by how many big trees came in last time. And I forget what the order was we did it in, but we thought it would be fun to do some extra large tables for the trees. And so we ran a row. Was it 7 or 8 8-foot tables?
8-foot tables.
8-foot tables, and they were 4 feet front to back and then 8 feet wide. It was like 2 4x4 foot stage sections. Yep. And what we found is for larger trees, we could create really great displays with that because it let us breathe that air into the display that you get for free with smaller trees. And so we thought, you know what, this can feed into our new categories. We can separate the giants from the normally big trees. And we reserved space mentally in the room as we had started designing it for, 8 to 12 of these extra large trees divided in 3 different categories. Well, here we are with, I think we accepted, 18 extra large trees across 3 categories?
I thought it was 24.
Is it 24? I don't even remember. But
oh my God,
large.
But it's like easily.
Actually, it was 23 or 4. Yeah, it was much. It might have been 8. It was 18 conifers. I don't remember, but it was a much bigger number than we'd expected. And we're actually having to go back now and look at our design to accommodate so many 8-foot tables, because being 2 feet wider and 2 feet deeper, that's a lot of space we hadn't accounted for when we were kind of designing the room.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, I think it looks like we're probably going to end up using the same backdrops again, but rather than using 2 of them up against walls, we'll be able to utilize what was the backside of those, which was fully covered, just like the other rows that were in the middle. And I think we're going to have enough space, but we'll have to see. I've yet to actually, we had to kind of wait for the jury results to come back and be finalized before we could start thinking about finalizing the exhibit layout.
Because now we know within a handful of trees roughly what there's going to be in each category. And the only category that actually matters for now is going to be on an 8-foot table or 6-foot table.
Yeah.
And if more trees start swapping out, then we'll cross that bridge as we get to it. It'll be fine. But yeah, we ended up with a lot more big trees. So it'll be interesting. This will be one of the first shows I've been to anywhere that has a large number of big trees in a spot designated for big trees. I mean, Kokofu doesn't have trees this big by and large, and they definitely don't line them up together on extra big tables. That's just not a thing.
Well, I mean, they have big trees. They're just
Not
kind
that
of
many of them, and not that big.
they're kind of stacked together too.
Yeah,
They're too close.
we're yeah. I've gone through a handful of show books looking at the sizes. There aren't that many giant trees. Like big here's a lot bigger.
Like they come in like 100 centimeters is kind of the top end in Kokufu.
Yeah, and you can get you'll see 120 wide or 110, 120 tall. Sometimes maybe the gin will go up 130, 140, but that's rare.
Yeah.
100, like a meter, that's going to be a big chunk of those.
So
I ran the averages and I totally forget what we came up with, but I remember the first time I looked at a Kokufu book, the average height of the large trees was something like 31 inches or something. It was pretty small.
For this expo of the accepted extra large trees, I am actually totally blanking on which one was the biggest, but I think there's a couple of really big ones.
92 inches?
Oh my God.
I mean, or is it 80, 86, 89? There will be some bigger than normal trees in this show. People see some big trees. Yeah, it'll be kind of fun to see. And we're literally trying to figure out the logistics of getting them in the room and like having it make sense so that it doesn't just dwarf everything or close down a whole aisle because it sticks out so far. So we're having to make plans for that because based on the way the deadwood might be configured on an extra large tree, that can make some display challenges.
I think that was actually, I remember the winning tree from the Artisans Cup, the first prize winner in the Artisans Cup.
It came so far forward.
It had like this giant jutting arm of deadwood that you had to kind of like, you're like, oh, I don't want to hit that.
Right. Yeah. In the photo, it looks like a bonsai, but in person, you have to walk around it.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, wait, shouldn't there be like a stanchion here or something?
Yeah. And we're in that exact same boat this year. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that was a surprise. A lot of big trees. And that apparently is just, who knows if that's going to be a trend or always the case, or if that's just this year. We'll see.
Well, it's funny because big trees and little trees have a different effect on people. And I actually had someone write to me and say, why is it that I only like big trees? You show me a mame and I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah.
But I love big trees. I find them, infinitely fascinating. And I kind of thought to myself, you just get a completely different feeling from a 6-inch tree or an 8-inch tree or even a 12-inch tree than you get from a 36-inch tree.
Yeah, some people teach that, big trees are no better than small trees. And I would actually teach that they're very fundamentally different. Large trees present more opportunities to convey complexity of design, complexity of bark texture, complexity of deadwood. And that's one category in which larger trees are fundamentally different than smaller trees. The other one is what you'd spoken to, they feel different. It's a different experience when you have to move your head and body to see both sides of a tree, when you have to step back to see all of a tree at the same time, as opposed to hold the thing in your hand. They both have compelling experiences, but I would never suggest they're the same experience.
I think I love both ends of the spectrum, but the logistics on the big end they're tough.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about doing the multi-tree displays. We both grew up loving 3-point displays because we've had a lot of medium trees over the years. It's a really nice way to present more seasonality, more texture, more foliar types, more styles just within one 6-foot space. And then Shohin is its own display game, essentially, where you have all kinds of different things all together.
I need to think of it as a game.
It's when you get into every last convention for how they were on the Japanese shows, it really is like a game of chess. Well, if this goes here, that has to go there, which means that can't be there, which means we lost that. So instead, if we start with this, we can put that there and then that there. And there's kind of a recipe for how you start it out. You literally, if you want to do a conventional Japanese display, you straight up start with the tree on top of the box, and that tells you if your box goes on the left or it goes on the right. And that one decision, every other tree flows from that.
You said game, and chess was not what was on my mind. For some reason, pachinko came into my head.
Pachinko would be kind of fun. See the little trees bouncing around through the pegs. Ping, 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 ping. That would be kind of hilarious. Well, probably the one other thing that came to mind, I think we touched about this a lot, but in really thinking about revealing the secrets of what the jury is looking for is if we take a step back and think that the jury members are people who apply great amounts of technique to trees over long periods of time, and that's what they do for a living, it's that kind of work they want to see reflected in the trees that they selected. And just looking from the outside at the process, it seems like there was a really strong desire to elevate the trees that had really clean work done to them and that had been handled in a really I don't want to use words like professional or intentional or the same buzzwords that everyone uses, but I'll say in a thoughtful manner, and that evidenced or reflected the kind of work that they like to do in trees themselves, and they kind of demonstrated that in the trees that were submitted.
Yeah, and as a jury member, I agree. Everybody has their own way of looking at bonsai, but that's why there are 5 jury members with different backgrounds and different sort of gardens full of trees. But there were some decisions that I made as a juror that were, I think, like, you actually questioned a couple of them, and I said, my experience with that is that this is not as good an example as what I am looking for.
Right.
And so that was...
So because you were more familiar with some species or styles, you could be a harsher critic for those.
Exactly.
And if you had seen some of those trees in person, you might know, wow, that looks weird in the photo, but you know the tree in person and know that that's actually a spectacular tree to have in the room.
I think there was a Brazilian rain tree submitted that I can't remember off the top of my head whether it got in, but I'm not familiar with them.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people are going to be very familiar with that tree, but I was not familiar with it. So, tropicals not being a strength of the Bay Area, as we discussed, but
It's funny. Another thing that came out that really cracked me up is some jury members had more of a sense of humor than others. Some of the displays, I would say, levity was a more relevant theme among their choices for some jury members, and other jury members were far more, quote, serious. Like, because some trees are funnier than others. Like they're usually going to be either more elegant or more cheeky or displayed in a different way or part of an alternative display. There's a lot of different ways to think about how to present a bonsai. And other people were like, give me the big trunks or give me the different species. And all of that just reinforced how important it is, as you'd noted, to have the 5 different people. And interestingly, now having gone through this exercise 2 times, I feel so great about not being on the jury. My role is helping just one of several people to decide who participates on the jury and then to try to interpret their wishes as best as possible. I am very comfortable in that role.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say to, your friend as a jury member, yeah, I didn't pick your tree.
Right.
And there's also, if your friend's tree didn't get in, you're like, well, but as one of 5 people, you can say, well, you can either decline to say whether.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, it's hard to tell people that their tree didn't get in. But I think that, like we've said a couple of times already, the most common takeaway is just
not yet. Yeah. And knowing that these trees are going on their way, and knowing that, honestly, again, 7 jurors we've worked with, they're all different. At some level, it's meaningless to say that a tree's better than another because everyone has a different opinion. No 2 jury members picked all the same trees. And so more and more, I'm just distancing myself from the idea that there's an objective better showing there that's not getting realized because of who is on the jury. We're getting consensus picks and we're getting long tail picks. And as trees get better, that's going to give the jury more to work with. So my takeaway is keep a decent number of people on the jury, maintain diversity among the jury members. I think that's super important, whether it's where they live, where they've studied, what they're familiar with. Maintain a healthy mix of people on there and then give them better trees to choose from year after year after year. Like we know we'll now, by the end of this year, we'll have been to 2 expos and we'll see what trees are chosen. And that's going to be a really good indication of what kind of where to shoot for in terms of what to produce in our own work.
I think that I can't think of any other secrets we haven't divulged.
No, that's pretty good. But do let us know if you think of any. Thanks so much for the chat today.
Thanks.
music on today's podcast was brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.